a little tired of corporate life, and I'm now a venture partner at SV Life Sciences. I've joined the dark side, or actually the very dark side, because I guess industry is the dark side. But anyway, that's who I am. You can read what I've done by reading the biography in the book. I thought I'd introduce Lucy Sanders in the following way by, actually, first of all, is Tom Higley here? He isn't, so that's fine. We'll do the necessary introductions of Tom a little later on in the proceedings. So I thought I'd introduce Lucy, who I'm sure you've read her bio, has been involved in making sure that women get a fair shake in the technology industry by just thinking a little bit about golf. I don't play golf. I'm glad I don't play golf. I'm even more glad I don't play golf. Now I found out that Scottish golf courses like Muirfield and Troon don't allow females to play on the course. And the Royal and Ancient, aptly named, I would say, in the UK, who runs UK Golf, have said, okay, well, because you don't let women play golf on your course, you can't hold the Open anymore, the British Open, on your course. And I'm thinking to myself, in this day and age, it is absolutely ridiculous that those organizations can get away with not allowing women to play golf on their course. What century are we living in? No more ado. Lucy, please tell us what century we're living in.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. First of all, Larry, thank you for a great dinner last night. That was a lot of fun. And I know from talking to people, you had some great sessions yesterday. I'm Lucy Sanders, CEO and co-founder of NCWIT. Not exactly the best name. It stands for the National Center for Women and Information Technology. And yes, I made that up. So I take full responsibility. We say NCWIT, we are a national center funded by the National Science Foundation. So that's why we don't have that real jazzy kind of marketing name. I want to talk to you about something that I presented originally at the Smithsonian Lemelson Institute on Innovation. It will be published soon as sort of a thought piece in MIT Press, so stay tuned for that. I wanted to talk to them about something that isn't very often talked about when you talk about gender in tech or gender in anything, and that is meaningful participation in innovation. We talk about numbers, and they're low, and they're not what they should be, but there's an impact here around innovation that if you leave with one thing, I want you to leave with the word absent, because women and other underrepresented groups are by and large absent in technology innovation today. So a couple caveats. We're going to look at this through a lens for women. But we all know, of course, that everybody has intersecting identities. So you can be a black woman, right? You can be religion, socioeconomic status, all sexuality, all kinds of things. We're going to say women and girls, but please know it's not just one homogenous group. That's number one. Number two, some of the things we're going to talk about here really relate to all people, not just women. So when we talk about making the technical culture a more welcoming, more innovative, and more creative place, it works for everybody, not just women. The other caveat I want to tell you is I'm a computer scientist explaining social science. So just hold that thought. My senior research scientists let me out on occasion to talk about social science. But if you want to dig deeper into some of those areas, I may have to say, don't know. Okay. I'm doing this as a top 10. I'm mourning the loss of David Letterman's late night show, and so I still do things with top 10 lists. I'm going to state the obvious first. Computing matters. Why this narrow slice? Why aren't you focused more broadly on science, technology, and engineering and math? Because computing matters to all of those disciplines. Computing matters to advances in everything. We live increasingly in a digital world. Computing underlies all of it. It is a foundational skill. The way we start businesses, our healthcare, our well-being, the way we entertain ourselves, the way we fight our wars, even the way we commit crime, computing matters, increasingly so in our world. So our focus is squarely on computing. When we say IT, we mean all of it. We mean the government definition of computing. Secondly, it matters to healthcare, right? Every place, not just healthcare records. I don't want to talk about them. but it certainly matters in emergency response. It matters in the biotech labs. It matters everywhere in healthcare, increasingly. So it certainly matters to all of you here who care about healthcare and well-being and everything else you care about. Number two, who's inventing healthcare? IT. More broadly, who's inventing technology? So here we start with a few numbers. I'm not going to talk about the pipeline much today, but yes, in the United States, we have a pipeline problem when it comes to computing, computer science. There is a computer science AP course in our high schools, but it doesn't count as a science or math credit to graduate from high school in almost any state. And it's not in public schools in any real way. So we can talk about pipeline later if you want to. There's a huge community activity trying to get rigorous, relevant, inclusive computer science into every school district in this country. And we're making progress. But you can see the numbers for girls. 19% of all computer science AP test takers are girls. That's up from 12% when we first started 10 years ago, so there is improvement there. And that translates into the percentage of women who get computing information sciences degrees at the post-secondary level. So we do have a pipeline problem. Continues into the workforce. Women make up over 57% of the US professional workforce, about 25% of all US technology jobs more broadly. So these would be even help desk or database administrator all the way through PhD computer scientists inventing. 19% of all software developers, 18 to 19%, far fewer hardware developers are women. And when you get into the technology leadership position, so I want to be really clear, this is not Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook. She's in a leadership position at a tech company. We're talking about women inventing, creating, innovating tech. Chief technology officers, architects, designers, the people who are making the calls, leadership, R&D vice presidents, 5% women. And if you looked at the numbers for other underrepresented groups, they'd be far worse. They're not, I would be embarrassed to even put them on a slide. I know, I'm depressing you, aren't I? I'm so sorry. So early in the morning. So now let's get into the meaningfulness of this. Those are the numbers, and they're horrible, and we have to work on them, but it's not just a numbers game. It's an innovation game. So NCWIT runs a patenting study every few years, and it might surprise you, or maybe it won't, to know that our nonprofit, which is not very big, is the only group that has ever looked at the gender of IT patents, gender of inventors on IT patents. So here's what we do. We crawl the US patent database. It's all public information. We use gender matching software, 90% accurate. So I know you guys are scientists. And we assign a gender to each inventor on a patent. All IT patents, again, the government definition, very broad, right? Hardware, software, semiconductors, telecommunications, et cetera. The bottom line of this eye chart, last 30 years, all IT patents in all categories, 88% had male-only invention teams. 2% had female-only invention teams, and the rest mixed gender invention teams. So we know that women aren't patenting in this space, in any large numbers. And so we can get back to that in a little while, but this is just one metric that we have around innovation. There are others around the kinds of research papers that are submitted to the big computing professional meetings. And so it speaks to the lack of a diverse voice at the table. So with numbers like these, we can be pretty confident, and also anecdotal evidence and talking to people and being inside hundreds of companies, that women, by and large, are not helping to invent the technology upon which our world depends. And there's kind of like, I was talking to somebody last night, I said, sometimes, depending on the mood I'm in, and you look like friendly people, I say there's two sides to this ledger. One side is, think about what we would be inventing and creating if women were at the technology design table alongside men, not instead of men. Our technology is not horrible by any stretch of the imagination, but alongside men, think about the problems we would solve and how we would solve them, and if we brought different life experiences to that table. Right? The darker side of this ledger is that this world, this digital world that we're building, if people aren't part of a world as builders, they will not be able to participate at equal levels in that world if they're not helping to build it. So we may never catch up. So really, it's a world changer, I think, if we can get more underrepresented groups creating technology. So why does this matter? A couple things. If you were to go inside any major tech or non-tech company and look at their technology teams, you would see by and large homogenous teams. By and large homogenous teams. And yet we know from research that diversity on teams helps the team solve complex problems faster and get to better solutions. This is from research from Scott Page called The Difference. And he uses analytical modeling and the research protocol in his book. You can look at it and see, but he has come to this conclusion through his research. Also, there's now emerging research on teams and the intelligence of teams, the collective intelligence of teams. And it turns out teams have intelligence just like individuals do. And the intelligence of a team is not the summation of the individual IQs of everybody on the team. So this research team set out to look at team intelligence, and they didn't set out to prove what they proved here. I mean, they did discover that the intelligence of teams was not the summation of individual team members, but they do this, by the way, by putting people in a room, giving them tasks, and then they change up, and then they remeasure. So they started adding women to homogeneous groups of men. And then they remeasured the collective intelligence, and they found that they could add up to 60%, roughly a third, women before the collective intelligence of the group dropped. They supposed it was because when you have homogeneous teams, there's less turn-taking, there's more bravado, there's more anything, right? Story for me is like when we started in CWED, I looked around one morning and I realized I only had women on my team. Right? It's one of those moments where the mirror's up to your face. You go, oh. So we started hiring guys, and I have no doubt the collective intelligence of our team has improved. So this is not just, it's a balance issue. So why is this happening? Right? We have horrible data. We know that women aren't patenting or writing the research papers or going into these top technology leadership positions. We know they're not really driving their fair share of creativity in this space, but why? So any questions? You guys are quick studies. All right. Do you remember where this came from? It's a GoDaddy ad from a couple Super Bowls ago. And although it was really a horrible thing, they yanked it like immediately because it had such a unfavorable response. But it does sort of paint the picture. We would not say that the woman is a chief technology officer, and we'd probably say that's the IT guy, right? Although somebody the other day pointed out to me that he has a tie on, so probably not, The other thing that you should notice is they're white. Okay, so society is biased about who does tech. What causes this? Research scientists tell us we all have what they would call schemas. These are our mental shortcuts. They help us interpret the world, They help us make quick decisions. They keep us safe. Everybody has them. There's just normal reactions to living. So you don't have to decide, oh, that's a car, or a tree, or a house, or, that's, whatever. And so they help us. They're great. But they can also cause you to miss things like that Bronco in the hair over there, because you weren't looking for it. They cause you to miss things or to misinterpret things. And when that happens, it's called unconscious bias. Now, these schemas can be challenged and changed. Like right now, our country collectively is challenging the schema of who runs for president. And more in this election than even before. All right, so these schemas can change and they can be challenged, but you can never get rid of unconscious bias. It's always there. Everybody's biased. Men and women are equally biased in this space. So there's a test. Anybody heard of Project Implicit before? Good. So Harvard, Virginia, lots of universities running this test. It's called an associated bias test. So they have all kinds of societal issues that they test you on. So you can go online and you can take it. And basically, they put up gendered words. In this case, for science and tech, they put up gendered words, and they put up scientific words, tech words, and you have to kind of match things up, right? I don't want to give it away. You have to match things up, but they're not measuring if you get the right answer, because most of us are socially correct and we'll get the right answer, but they are measuring how long it takes you. Because the longer it takes you, the more you're struggling, with trying to make that association. So I went on and I took the test. And anybody want to know where I was? I wasn't at the highest possible associated bias. In other words, I somehow think that women can be great technologists, but I was moderately. I had a moderate association between men and science and tech. So here I am. I'm a Bell Labs fellow. I'm a chief technology officer. I have 6 patents. I've led kick-ass design teams, and even I don't think women are great technical thinkers. I know, I was like really bummed out, and so I would encourage you to go and sort of take it. Of course, the researchers can pick apart some of the protocols on this test, but it's just an indicator, again, of this unconscious bias that we carry around, and we use it to make the point that women are as biased as men. This is not men doing something wicked to women. It's society doing wicked things, I would say, to women who want to be in science and tech, and to men who want to be in liberal arts. Right. This starts young. Anybody know there is a computer engineer Barbie? Yes, there is. And it's the first Barbie Mattel ever made a few years ago that wears sensible shoes. We argued with them to not make her laptop pink. I don't think we got too far with it. But anyway, who knew there was a book? I didn't know there was a book that comes out with a Barbie. We found out a couple years ago there is indeed a book. And we got the book and looked at it, and it said stuff like this. I'm only creating the design ideas, Barbie says, laughing. I'll need Stephen's and Brian's help to turn it into a real game. Now, we're not a protest organization. We're actually more a personal trainer, let's work together, kumbaya kind of place. But we protested this, and they yanked it. And if you want to get a good laugh, go to Feminist Hacker Barbie, where a bunch of computer professionals rewrote the book. And some of it was not pretty language. All right. Point is, it starts very young. Okay, now this is a systems issue. Okay, I said before, it's societal bias. This is a systems issue. And because we don't have a lot of time today, I just want to drop to the bottom line and tell you what's true. Minority groups in tech are not broken. We don't need remedial help. We don't need to lean in. We don't need more confidence. Of course, everybody needs professional development, don't get me wrong, but we're not broken. So many efforts are focused on this stuff, Oh, let's have a women's club and teach them how to be more confident, or, let's do that. It's just, we're not broken. We went to the best schools, we got the best grades, we have great technical insights, not broken. Likewise, majority men are not evil. Except maybe Larry, I don't know. You set yourself up by sitting on the front row. Okay. Not evil. They don't come to work every day. Like I told you, men and women are equally biased. They're not evil. And they're so scared to say anything or do anything because they feel like they're just going to step in it. So it really is societal bias. It's a systems issue. We run a workshop on how you actually take business processes and decompose them, looking for where unconscious bias might get you. In other words, poof. Like, let's just say I have a fellow program, for example. And let's just say that all the prior fellows select the new fellows. And all the prior fellows are a majority group. What do you think you're going to get in the new fellows? The same. Why are we using this process? We should fix it. You can't get rid of unconscious bias, but you can mitigate it by looking at your processes and analyzing and treating it like it is a systems issue. Bottom line, a welcoming tech culture where all identities can show up and bring not just their best ideas to work and do the most innovative technical work of their lives, but even their worst ideas and still feel okay. A place where I can be safe to put my idea out there, and even if crap, I don't feel smaller, or demeaned. All right, that's the bottom line. Let's do a little bit more on unconscious bias. Keeping me honest on time?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, good. So I want to show a little bit about this at work so you sort of see how it works. So here we are, society. We have all these biases and schemas, and we're employees, and we take them to work. Can't park them at the door. They're there. And they manifest themselves in a culture in either very subtle ways, which you can't really put your hands around, and or they instantiate themselves in the processes of the organization, explicitly or implicitly, right? This is kind of a generic architecture picture for any kind of group where there's strong societal bias. So men in nursing, for example, this would be true for men in nursing. Or try being a man who wants to be a kindergarten teacher, right? This would be true as well. So this is kind of a generic picture. So what do we mean by subtle dynamics? Let's just do a quick study here. This is a resume study about Heidi Roizen. Anybody know Heidi? I know you know her. Yeah. Okay, so Heidi gave a resume to a professor at Columbia, Frank Flynn, and he, of course, did the usual thing where he took her resume, made a copy, changed the name to Howard. So now we got two exactly the same, pretty heavy tech entrepreneurial resume, Heidi and Howard, exactly the same. Then he gives it to his business students and asks them to rate Heidi and Howard on certain characteristics. You know how these studies work, right? This one's good because it's about tech and entrepreneurship. And he called the results very disturbing and statistically significant, right? So here we go. Both men and women. How power-hungry, self-promoting, and disingenuous was Roizen? Heidi is the darker blue bar. More power-hungry, more self-promoting, and more disingenuous than Howard. How competent and effective was Roizen? Female Roizen, less competent and less effective. Same resume, heavy tech, both female and male students at a smart school like Columbia. Okay. Would you like, hire, or like to emulate Roizen? No, no, no. Amazing, isn't it? Now, she would never know this was going on. This is just what happens when she goes about her life, doing things. This is an example of a subtle dynamic. Has a huge impact over the life of somebody's career. This is a subtle dynamic. And Heidi is a kick-ass person, right? So it's like, this is serious stuff. Another subtle dynamic, Claude Steele, Joshua Aronson have done this work. It's called stereotype threat. And it's the fear that a member of an underrepresented group, I don't care what kind of group they're in, has that he or she will reinforce a negative stereotype about their group. It's unconscious. They don't wake up in the morning and put it on. I think I'm going to wear a little stereotype threat to work today. No, no. It's unconscious. So a couple research studies here. This one was at Stanford. They took white male math students, very smart, right? They put one in one group, one in the other group, and they said, we're going to give you really hard math tests. But they told one group they were going to be studied to know how come Asian males are better at math than white males, which is a growing stereotype. Try being an Asian who sucks at math. Just try it, I guarantee. Anyway, the result, of course, was that the group that was told they were being studied because they were somehow inferior to another group scored worse on the tests. This is true for elderly people as well. Probably the most disturbing thing that Joshua Aronson discovered was that, the math SAT test? where you get your little number 2 pencil and you fill in gender before you take the test. All he did was move that to the end of the test, and girls' scores went up. Because they were not reminded of the negative stereotype around girls and math. You want to know what happened to the boys' scores? They went down. Because they weren't reminded of the positive stereotype. So now College Board, College Board refused to change this. This is a big deal for kids going to college, for heaven's sakes, right? So they're starting to come around to our point of view on this particular issue. So you can see subtle perceptions. There are other things that they call micro inequities, the drip, 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 like actually Lucy had a good idea. Actually, as if she doesn't have a good idea more of the time. There's subtle dynamics like that at play in our cultures because of unconscious bias, and they have serious impact. Just because we call it unconscious bias doesn't make it harmless. Super harmful. Stereotype threat shows up at work like this. Tend to not speak up at meetings until your ideas are 150% perfect. You tend to not take that challenging leadership position unless you are 150% overqualified. You couch your work. I think, I hope, I was lucky. You know those guys I said I hired? They showed up exactly this way until I got more men. Totally different context, totally different everything. It's called stereotype threat. It's just, I have to be completely perfect. It's not a lack of confidence. It's contextually situated. Of course, some people in underrepresented groups have a lack of confidence, but we shouldn't jump there first, right? It's contextually situated. Okay, the other part, remember we had stereotype threats and then we had institutional barriers. Not to spend too long on this, but again, these are the business processes or organizational processes, the way things are done. And unconscious bias can instantiate itself in these processes, and without top leadership looking at them with a lens of unconscious bias, it's going to perpetuate. Hiring, task assignment. Do you know most tech companies today have no idea how they assign technical tasks? They have no idea. Women are subtly encouraged through unconscious means to take what we would call execution roles, system test, project management, things like that, customer-facing work, because we're told we're good communicators, as if men aren't. All right, and men tend to be assigned hardcore, creative, leading-edge tech jobs. These are all like super important things. Performance appraisal. Women's forms are shorter, often. They are praised for luck and collaboration. Men are praised for skills. Okay. Hiring. Everybody knows the symphony orchestra research. They put the curtain up, blind auditions. People, auditioned, and I think it's like 35 to 40% more women joined symphony orchestras just by the conductors not knowing who they were. They had to take off their shoes, they couldn't speak, they just played. A lot of companies are starting to try to do blind interviews now to strip some of this off and try to get that out of their process. Okay. Companies are waking up. Those of you who have been around me enough to know, I think, oddly, the K-16 education system is further ahead than the corporate space in this. And I mean, I whine about it constantly. And so from my perspective, I'm a former corporate executive, companies are lagging behind. So this is my nice slide. Waking up. They don't treat it like a business imperative. And when they do, you see CEOs like Brian Krzanich from Intel and Tim Cook from Apple taking public accountability, publishing data, making it a business imperative. Once a CEO owns this and treats it the same way he or she treats other business issues, which is this, it's an innovation issue, it gets work done. This is no big surprise. Absolutely no big surprise. And yet companies all the time, it's kind of like, I have a diversity and inclusion person, they'll do it. Or I'll bring in Korn Ferry, they'll take it, they'll get it done. CEO has to own it. People are starting to publish their data. This is Google's data. You want to know how come some of these companies actually started publishing their data? Jesse Jackson showed up at their shareholder meetings. He bought a share of stock and showed up. Nobody wanted him to show up. But you can see this data. I mean, it's pretty, and every company's kind of like this. Where we want them to go next is to break it into roles. Who's in what kind of technology role? Are they in creative roles, execution roles? We want to know what they're doing to drive the bottom line innovation of these companies. But they are starting to move. And my last main point here, I do have a 10, but it's a shameless plug for us, so, is that, in my opinion, as a technology leader, it's a fundamental failure of technology leadership. Who runs a team where somebody gets interrupted all the time and the leader puts up with it? Who runs a team where people take credit for others' work? Who runs a team where you have team members who you know are bright and they don't speak up and you just think that's okay? I could go on and on about this, a fundamental lack of leadership. You see the programmer cultures, you see the alpha culture coming out in tech. Fundamental failure, in my opinion. We tell them things like this. Hey, CEO, like, you should own this. CEOs have said to me, what should I do? I go, well, what do you do for your other business issues? Don't you have a C in front of your name? Like, go figure it out. Look at your processes. Hold people accountable. Think, like, you can do this. And once they do it, it's really not rocket science. It really is a good hygiene in technology leadership. So, you should see some of the websites. Yeah. Okay, enough of that. If any of you are corporate executives, I'd really like to meet you. I have more to say about this. How can you help? There's always ways to help. Back to the pipeline. Please encourage any young person to take a computer science course in high school. They don't have to become computer scientists. They're going to need it for everything. Please, please, please encourage them. Encourage them equally. You can encourage one student. That makes a huge impact. They'll look up to you. You're scientists. They'll look up to you. Encourage that. If you don't have computing in your school district, we can help you with our advocacy to demand rigorous, relevant, inclusive computer science in every school district in this country. If you buy healthcare IT, why don't you ask them, if you want to have a little fun, what are the demographics of your technology workforce? Are you being transparent? We want to know. We're intelligent consumers. We want to know if you're moving towards a more diverse and inclusive workforce so that the technology you give us for healthcare and well-being actually is reflective of the people who use it. Anyway, you'll at least have some fun if you ask that question. And then, if you have a company, a company, and they need a little personal training in this space, we're happy to help. And CWIT itself is a change leader network, 700 organizations across the United States, full pipeline, K-12 through career, working all year long in some specific way to increase girls' and women's meaningful participation in computing. We have lots and lots of programs, projects. We have all kinds of free resources on our site, ncwit.org. We don't believe in monetizing access to information. It's all free. So in closing, I'll say, if you want to think about us easily, think about us as the NPR of gender and tech, because we're very community-focused. The consumer reports of gender and tech, because we tell the truth. And we have a research foundation. The personal trainers of gender and tech, and the open source of gender and tech, because everything is free. And so with that, do we have time for questions?
We do.
Okay, thank you.
So we certainly have a few minutes for questions. So we'll start in the middle of the center aisle. If I knew your names, I would call them out, but I don't.
Thank you. Wonderful talk. My question relates to the initial components of your presentation, where you presented some arguments as to the value of diversity, and you mentioned how they serve to improve the ability of teams to solve problems, and so on. And it seems to me that in many ways this is promoting diversity as useful because it serves a system that is already in place that is not owned or controlled by minority groups. And I understand the value of that, but I guess my question is, in what ways is it possible to defend diversity as intrinsically useful and not useful insofar as it serves some pre-existing power structure?
This is where the computer scientist in me has to almost beg off a little bit, right? It is intrinsically useful, of course, and you're right. We do have to kind of pitch this. If we want innovation, we have to pitch it to the people who are creating innovation, right? That tends to be the private sector, so we have to kind of talk that way. But it is socially useful, of course. You know, I just don't know exactly how to back that up. So I'll give you my card, and I can ask. But the reason why the pitch is kind of like this is because really innovation is happening in those spaces right now, and we need to be able to talk to them about that. Mm-hmm.
So let's see, we'll take that one there.
So there's probably a lot of things that correlate with gender. And I wonder if there's research that asks the question of maybe this isn't about gender, it's about height.
Okay,
Wait a minute. Let's stand up and see who's taller.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well said. Okay, I'd like an under 40 question, please. There's an under 40 question at the back.
In the back?
Under 40 is a good number, by the way. I wish I was there.
Unfortunately, I'm not under 40, but that's all right. And it
From
might have
here,
been
you
her-
look like you're under 40.
Thank
so
you.
it's okay.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. I have a couple. First off, thank you so much for your message, Lucy, and for the data that you provided behind it. I think it's really helpful, and the implicit bias data in particular. One of the questions I have for you that I didn't hear a lot on is really the effect of motherhood and the culture around motherhood in the workspace and how we support each other. And I just want to put one piece of data out that I think we continue to pour data on how it is different for women to go back into the workforce as it is for men after having a child. Data that came out last week, for example, suggested, it was Australian data, that if women worked about 20 hours a week or less in the first 6 months after going back to work, there was absolutely zero effect on their rates of breastfeeding at 4 and 6 months. A World Health Organization, CDC, AAP guideline recommended for the health of our future generation. And yet it's very hard for employers, right, to support different kind of styles of women going back into the workforce. And I think there's extreme judgment, particularly at high levels and in the technology space. So so we have lots of data around how women and men can go back to work, and lots of lean-in type arguments and
your question
narratives.
is?
I'm there in just a second. Thank you. Is really because I guess my question is, can you comment on how we take the data around motherhood and how we take the culture around motherhood and help women stay strong and advocate for what they need in this space?
Yeah, so there's a lot in your question. We have something on our website called a systemic change model, all right? And within that change model, I mean, basically the sense that it's not just one thing that will help us get that welcoming tech culture that's innovative and diverse and inclusive. Competing responsibilities is one of those things. We would call what you just said something a little bit bigger and broader, competing responsibilities. And we would advocate and do that it should be for both men and women, that it should be something that needs to be okay. In tech, you're right, tech's horrible with this. And in tech right now, we see that first line, second line tech managers and the culture itself makes it a stigma to take any kind of parental leave. So we have to keep coaching people. We're inside some big tech companies now where they wouldn't even work virtually. Can you believe that as a tech company? So we have to keep working with them on how that shows up for them. And it's very much a part of our personal training is competing responsibilities. We didn't go into it here. We also know that mid-career tech women leave their jobs at a rate of 56% by mid-career. And they're not staying home. 3/4 of them are back in the workforce doing other things, just not at that company. So there's a lot of frustration during that time period as well, which is another reason to look at competing responsibilities. Absolutely.
Okay, we've got time for a couple more. I'm looking around. We will take right at the back there, guy with his hand up.
I'm just going to take this. As a
Hey,
woman,
okay, well, you can do that. That's fine. Good for you.
I'm under 40.
I've been looking in your direction. It's okay. And you
I'm tall, as
qualify.
tall as the average male. No, as a woman, I'm applying to jobs in tech. And so this, I know this is happening, but this is sobering. What can I do and what can other women do while industry is trying to catch up to improve our chances of getting a job?
Yeah, well, first of all, if you're a woman applying for a tech job, I guarantee you'll get a job. I mean, people are waking up to this. They are eager to hire people from underrepresented groups, into tech. I think the very first thing I would tell you, though, is remember the stereotype threat thing, because you may be overwhelmed in a culture where you're the only one of, right? And it can start to, you may start thinking internally that you're not cut out for it or something. So that's one piece of advice. The other piece of advice I want to give everybody here is that the best advocates for women in tech and culturally are the men. Okay, so too long, members of underrepresented groups have been told it's their issue to go away and work. That's the least effective way. They have the least power in these organizations and cultures. It has to be that all of us are working on it together. Some of that is around male. We have some resources on male advocates and the kinds of things you can do as men to be advocates for change in culture. This is not about advocacy for individual women. We need that too, mentorship, sponsorship, and all of that. But we really need men as advocates to change the culture. So write to me when you land that hot job, and we'll make sure that company is a member of NCWIT.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to the next talk now. So thank you, everybody, for your participation, and thank you for a wonderful talk.